Well, cliche that may be, but that speaks of motorcycling to me anyway. A 73-mile stretch of Highland scenery is in the running for the best bikers road trip in the UK. The Max Point West route, I wonder who made that up, starts in the shadow of Ben Nevis in Fort William. It passes the Glenfinnan Viaduct, the Bonnie Prince Charlie Monument, and then through the remote peninsula of Arnamurchan, ending up at the Lighthouse, the furthest point on the Western mainland. It's up against half a dozen contenders from elsewhere in the UK. And Visit Scotland is urging people to vote to support their local route. I'm joined now by Polly and Dave Smith from Moffat, who run Motorcycle Scotland. Hello, guys.
Good morning, Will.
Should explain you are both guys, despite being called Polly. That's a childhood nickname, is that right?
Yes,
yeah. Okay. Are your father and son? Just tell us something. Motorcycle Scotland, what's that?
It's all about promoting tourism throughout the whole of Scotland, because we've got such a wonderful, wonderful country with beautiful, beautiful roads made for motorcyclists throughout the world to come here now.
Right. And this particular route, the Max Point West, I mean, I've been along that route, actually. I mean, it's a bit of a challenge, actually, because the end part of it, along the peninsula, is pretty tight roads and all that.
It's a great road. Probably not ideal for performance bikes, but of course, if you're on a performance bike, that's not really the place you're going to go. But it pretty much gives you everything. It gives you the remote feel that you want on a motorbike. It hasn't got as much traffic as some of the other places in Scotland, and more than that, it gives you absolute beauty from the time you start to the time you're finished, with a lot of varying places in the route, which makes it very different to a lot of normal routes.
And Polly, you're a bit later to biking, are you? A bit of a born-again biker in that sense?
I wouldn't say born again, actually.
Born late?
Born late. I only got into it about 5 years ago, so the world's my oyster. I'm still discovering it.
And what stopped you when your dad was clearly so keen?
If I'm honest, I'm still a young guy. I'm 33, so I've been riding for 5 years. In the early time, obviously, biking is quite an expensive hobby, and let's face it, it can be dangerous. So for those two reasons, I kind of thought to myself, well, later on in my years, I can get into it. And it was just on a whim. My mother, actually, funny enough, decided that she wanted to get her license and invited me to come along, and I thought, why not? At least I'll have it on my license, and I can pick it up at any time. But I got to be honest, I've got the bug.
All right. Well,
Dave,
I mean, Polly mentions the safety factor. I mean, you have to say, actually, you know, and this year's been particularly bad thus far this spring for biker deaths, particularly in the Highlands. I mean, it can be dangerous, can't it?
The problem we've got is that if you do end up in a collision on a motorcycle, obviously it is more dangerous than if you're in a cage in a car. However, having said that, biking, both in the motorcycles themselves and the kit, and indeed attitudes towards motorcycling, have changed so much over the years that there's more bikes on the road, and that might account for some perhaps increase in the fatality rate, but the injury rate has decreased considerably over the last 20, 30 years. Good kit, good bikes, and more importantly, bikers tend to be more interested in safety themselves, and they ride properly. So you haven't got as many of the Zoom kids as you used to have 20, 30, 40 years ago.
And you've got a hotel, haven't you?
Yeah.
I mean, but part of this is trying to boost kind of sort of biking tourism. Is that something that you've noticed wasn't being addressed, that people weren't sort of catering for the bike?
We went to Europe, and we saw how strong motorcycle tourism was in the Alps and in places like Austria, Italy. And very, very Lani, five-star establishments want to be motorcycle friendly because of the profile of the motorcyclist, who has changed dramatically over, again, the last 20, 30, 40 years. So it's definitely something we did. We attract motorcyclists from all over the world now, and we definitely a staging point for Scotland, and it's just great to see the growth in motorcycling.
How does Scotland fare in terms of somewhere for bikers to come to? Because obviously you're going to ride your own bike. The cost of fuel and general costs. Can we compete?
Absolutely. Scotland is now being seen and being ranked as probably in the top 4 motorcycle destinations in the world. 10, 15 years ago, it was clearly the Alps. That was the place to go. The Picos, the Pyrenees down in Spain and the bottom end of France was another very, very good place to go. And then, of course, Norway. More recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a huge upsurge in Scotland, and Scotland is definitely on the worldwide motorcycle map.
And I gather, Polly, you've not done this Max Point West route. Is that the next thing for you?
It is absolutely on my to-do list. Yeah,
Right.
I've read quite a bit about it. It looks good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you guys, are you heading back to the borders today from Glasgow?
Oh yeah,
On your
but
bikes?
we're going back the long way round. having got us here today, we're going back the long way.
All right, well, thanks very much for joining us. And safe riding, by the way, Polly
Thank you very
and
much.
Dave Smith from Moffat.
Thank you.
Well, that's all from us this morning. Bill will be back tomorrow morning, with Saturday morning, GMS with Isabel.
And Sunday.
Oh, and Sunday as well. Yeah, busy weekend coming up for him. I'll be back next week. But in the meantime, stay tuned. Stephen Jordan is up next.
So with all